3,000 people were in that church, and every single one of them watched it happen. The woman who had single handedly funded the church's new auditorium, the woman whose supermarket trucks had fed half the city, sat in the second row and pulled away from Pastor Chukwuemeka's outstretched hand like his touch carried poison. No explanation, no apology, just a sharp, deliberate shift backward. The pastor's hand hung in the air for 2 full seconds. Then he lowered it, said nothing, moved to the next person. By evening, her name was in everyone's mouth. By the following month, they would understand that what she did in those 2 seconds had saved her from something none of them had words for. And by the time the truth finally broke open, right there on that same altar, nothing would ever be the same again. Mrs. Chidinma Okonkwo was not born into money. She was born into hunger. The fourth child of a palm wine tapper in a small Anambra community, she had worn the same pair of school sandals for 3 years. She learned early that life would not under anything. By her late 20s, she had built a provision store in Onitsha market from a single rented store, waking before 4 in the morning, closing after 10 at night, doing the accounts herself by torchlight. Within 8 years, that stall had become 3 warehouses, 12 delivery trucks, and supply contracts across 4 states. She was the kind of wealthy that still remembered what empty felt like, which is why she gave generously, prayed genuinely, and trusted deeply. And it was that trust, pure, hard-earned, sincere, that almost destroyed her. She had joined Fountain of Glory Ministries 9 years earlier during the lowest season of her life. A major contract had collapsed. Her accountant had been stealing without her knowledge. A neighbor invited her to a midweek service and she came reluctantly and sat at the back. Pastor Chukwuemeka preached that night about the woman who lost her coin. He said, "What God has marked as yours cannot be permanently lost. It is just waiting for you to pick it up." She wept through the entire service. Over the following 9 years, she became one of the ministry's greatest pillars. She funded the sanctuary floor. She supplied food for 3 consecutive conventions at no cost. When the new auditorium was built, she wrote the single largest individual check the building committee had ever received. She consulted the pastor the way people consult elders, with reverence, with the belief that his words carried divine weight. He was not just her pastor, he was her spiritual father, which made what happened on that Sunday morning even more devastating. The service started normally. Worship was powerful. Then midway through the sermon, Pastor Chukwuemeka stopped speaking. He closed his Bible slowly. A hush fell before he had said a single word. "I need to pause," he said quietly. "The Spirit of God is showing me something happening in this building right now. There is a spiritual arrow of death assigned against lives in this church. God has instructed me to lay hands on every person here today." The choir slipped into a slow, trembling worship song. People wept before he had even moved from the altar. Some fell to their knees. Others stretched their hands upward, desperate, open, afraid. Mrs. Chidinma bowed her head and began to pray. But something was wrong. She could not name it. Everything around her looked genuinely spiritual. The tears were real, the worship was real, yet the deeper the atmosphere became, the more unsettled she grew inside, like standing in a beautiful room and slowly realizing the foundation beneath the floor was hollow. Then, without warning, she heard it. "Chidinma, do not let him touch your head." Her eyes opened. Nobody near her had spoken. Then, do not receive what he is carrying. Something cold moved through her chest. Not fear exactly, more like recognition. The way you recognize a voice you have not heard in a long time, but know immediately and completely. Pastor Chukwuemeka had stepped down from the altar and was moving row by row. People fell as he reached them. Some screamed. Some went completely silent and still, like a switch had been turned off. For a moment, she considered simply allowing it. 2 seconds. Just let him touch your head and it is done. You have received prayer from this man for 9 years. What could one more moment possibly do? But the instant she started to negotiate with the warning, a verse appeared in her spirit with a clarity that stopped her breath. To obey is better than sacrifice. Her jaw tightened. Pastor Chukwuemeka reached her row, one hand on the woman to her left. She fell backward immediately, one hand on the elderly deacon beside her. The man began weeping loudly. Then he stood before Mrs. Chidinma and extended his hand slowly toward her head. She moved, not dramatically, not with a speech, just a sharp, quiet shift backward, so sudden and complete that his hand found nothing but air. The silence that followed was the loudest thing that had ever happened in that building. Someone gasped. Someone said, and Pastor Chukwuemeka, the man who could silence 3,000 people with a single look, said absolutely nothing. He withdrew his hand and moved on like she was not even there. That controlled, deliberate silence told her more than any confession ever could have. The drive home was the loneliest she had ever taken. She sat on the edge of her bed until the room was dark. What have I done? What if I just humiliated a genuine man of God in front of thousands because of a feeling? But even in the middle of the shame, she could not shake the peace beneath it all. She had done one of the most socially costly things of her life, and something deep inside her felt settled. That was the most confusing part of everything. She returned the following Sunday. Some members had stopped greeting her. A woman she had helped financially through a difficult season walked past without eye contact. Then came testimony time. A young bus driver rushed to the altar trembling. Last Sunday, he said, voice already breaking, Papa declared there was an arrow of death in this church. That same week on Wednesday, I was driving on the expressway and a tanker lost control. My bus rolled 4 times. 3 passengers died at the scene, but I walked out, bruised. That is all. He pressed his fist to his mouth. I know that the prayer Papa prayed over me that Sunday stood between me and that grave. The church exploded. 3,000 people on their feet, weeping, shouting, speaking in tongues. And Mrs. Chidinma sat completely still in the middle of it all and felt something inside her chest begin to crack. What if I was wrong? What if I rejected something real? Then Pastor Chukwuemeka mounted the altar again. The Spirit is still speaking, he said. There is another arrow still moving through this congregation. We will do the laying of hands again. Every person, nobody should be left out. Fear entered the room instantly, like a door swinging open. Mrs. Chidinma bowed her head. Lord, I need to understand what is happening. Please. The voice returned, and this time it said something that made her blood go cold. If you receive it today, you will find paper where your money should be, and you will spend your life fighting for what has already been taken. Before she could breathe through those words, her eyes changed. Not physically. She could still see the church, the choir, the rows of people, but layered over everything like a second sight opening inside the first. She saw something else as Pastor Chukwuemeka stretched his hand toward a woman in the front row. Mrs. Chidinma no longer saw a hand. She saw the broad scaled head of a serpent pressing against the woman's forehead. She blinked, blinked again. It did not fade. It sharpened, row after row, the same vision. And each time she watched, she saw something she could only describe as light. Something living, leave the person it touched. She did not make a scene. She picked up her bag quietly, stepped into the side corridor, pushed through the exit door, and did not stop until she was inside her car with the doors locked and her whole body shaking. She sat in that parking lot and prayed, raw, wordless, desperate, until her breathing slowed. Then revelation flooded her spirit, like a story being told directly into her mind. She saw Pastor Chukwuemeka in a dark room kneeling before strange men, candles burned around them. She understood the agreement completely without hearing the words. He had grown impatient. The fame he wanted was coming too slowly for a man whose ambition had outpaced his patience, and someone had offered him a faster road. She watched him lay hands on member after member, and with every touch, something departed. Favor, peace, momentum. The quiet, invisible currency of a life spiritually aligned. It left them and flowed into him. She watched his cars multiply. She watched the building going up, all of it real, all of it visible, and all of it fed by something being quietly drained from the people who trusted him most. Tears poured from her eyes without her face changing expression. She drove home in silence and made her decision. She stopped attending. Her seat remained empty every Sunday after that. No announcement, no farewell. Some members assumed arrogance, others assumed her wealth had separated her. Nobody called to check. The pastor did not call. Not in the first week, not in the third, not after 2 full months. The woman who had funded the floor they preached on, who had written the largest check in the ministry's history, had vanished. And the shepherd did not come looking. That absence told her everything the visions had not. During those months away, she prayed more deeply than she had in years. She found a small, quiet fellowship and began to heal. And slowly, something extraordinary happened. Her business, which had experienced an unexplained flatness for over a year, began to breathe again. A hospital contract lost 18 months ago called to reinstate her. Two hotel chains in Abuja requested meetings. Her manager said the team's energy had shifted in a way nobody could explain, but everyone could feel. She said nothing to anyone. She just watched God move in the quiet. 4 months after she left, an old woman appeared near her gate one Tuesday evening, small, slow moving, wrapped in an old George fabric that had seen many years. She placed money in the woman's hands without hesitation, but the woman did not leave. She looked up slowly, her expression transformed, waited, like someone delivering a message they had been sent specifically to give. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. The hand that has been collecting cannot stop until the vessel is completely dry. He remembers the one who refused him, and he has not forgotten. Then she turned and walked into the evening crowd and was gone. Far from any church, in a room no congregation member had ever entered, Pastor Chukwemeka sat before the men he secretly served. The leader spoke without emotion. What you have been bringing is no longer adequate. The arrangement must be upgraded. It must come from your household, your wife, or your eldest son. Something left Pastor Chukwemeka's face in that moment, something that may have been the last piece of the man he used to be. That was not what I agreed to. His voice shook for the first time in years. The men around him were patient, the way people who hold all the cards can afford to be. Every car in your compound came through us. Every miracle that filled that building with fear and kept them coming back. All of it came through this table. You did not build anything. We built you, he argued. He pleaded. He threatened to expose everything. They laughed quietly, the laugh of men who had heard that threat before. Then a voice from the edge of the room spoke once. Nobody leaves this table walking away clean. Nobody. He stood at his children's bedroom door that night and looked at their faces and felt something collapse. Inside him, he had no name for. He was trapped. And unlike the members he had kept in manufactured fear for years, this fear was entirely real. Cornered and desperate, he made one final negotiation. Instead of someone from his household, he would bring them someone else, someone whose virtue had never been successfully collected, the one who had gotten away. The following Sunday was the church's sixth anniversary. Full capacity live band, television cameras along the walls. Pastor Chukwuemeka mounted the altar looking exactly as he always looked, composed, certain, anointed. He welcomed the congregation, led the opening prayer. Then, mid sentence, his voice stopped. Not paused, stopped. His body did not fall. His eyes did not close. He simply stood at the pulpit and could not produce another word. His mouth was open. His chest was moving, but nothing came out. An elder touched his arm. Papa, are you all right? He looked at the elder, looked at the congregation, looked directly at the cameras recording everything, and something in his face changed. Not collapse, not breakdown, but something far more unexpected. Relief. Like a man who has been carrying something crushing for too long and has finally put it down. He reached for the microphone. His hand was steadier than it had been in years, and Pastor Chukwuemeka began to confess everything, not quickly, not in chaos, slowly and methodically, like a man who had rehearsed this moment in the dark for months and was finally allowing it to happen in the light. The dark room, the men, the covenant he made because he could not bear to wait for God's timing, the laying of hands, what it truly was, and what truly happened every time a member bowed their head before him. The arrow of death announcements, every single one crafted deliberately to fill the room with enough fear that people would rush forward willingly. All of it, everything. His wife stood from the front row, sat back down, then walked out of the building. Elders wept with their heads in their hands. Members sat frozen, not the frozen of worship, but the frozen of people whose world has permanently rearranged. Then he said one final thing. There is a woman who used to sit in this church. A woman I tried twice to touch and twice she pulled away. Her name is Mrs. Chidinma Okonkwo. She heard from God both times and both times she obeyed despite everything it cost her publicly. He paused. His voice was breaking. I came very close to using this anniversary service to complete what I had planned to do to her. She is the reason I am standing here confessing today. Because the moment I agreed to move against someone walking in genuine obedience, something broke loose in me that I could not put back. He set the microphone down on the pulpit, sat on the altar steps, and covered his face. There are things this story will not allow us to leave behind. Obedience in public is costly, but disobedience in the spirit is costlier. Mrs. Chidinma lost relationships. She lost her reputation temporarily. She walked out of a building she had helped construct, but she kept everything that actually mattered: her destiny, her peace, her business, her life. The things people watched her lose were small. The things she kept were eternal. Fear is not the Holy Spirit. Every Sunday, a new arrow, a new danger. And every Sunday, that fear drove people forward into the very hands that were draining them. When a spiritual environment consistently generates fear, and the only solution to that fear is always the same person, that is not revival. That is a trap designed to keep you desperate and dependent. The silence of a shepherd is a confession. A true shepherd notices a missing sheep. When someone who claimed to carry your soul in prayer cannot find the energy to send a single message after you disappear, that silence is telling you exactly what you were always worth to them. And shortcuts always build longer roads. Pastor Chukwemeka did not begin this journey wanting to destroy people. He began it wanting to accelerate what he believed was coming anyway. But in patience, choosing to take by force what God had set on a timeline led him into a room he could not leave. Protect your head, protect what you receive, protect what you allow to be spoken over your life, and by whom. The warning voice inside you is worth more than the embarrassment of obeying it in public. And if you are sitting in a place right now where fear is the regular atmosphere and one person always holds the only solution, be still, listen. What you hear in that stillness may be the most important thing you have ever been told. Not all men of God are real. Many people are struggling in life today because of the hands that they refuse to touch them. If this story moved something in you, please subscribe so you never miss a story from this channel. Share this with one person today, just one. You never know what they are sitting inside right now. In the comments, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a warning in your spirit that you almost talked yourself out of obeying? What happened when you listened? I will see you in the next story.